COVID didn't change everything. COVID didn't ruin everybody's life. The only reason why people who say that is because they spent their whole life being so sheltered from marginalization and actual hardship that COVID was the end of the world for them. It took being told that you can't go out to your nightlife, your favorite restaurants, you can't travel, you can't go on vacation. It took their cities and counties setting curfews, and it took a virus spreading for them to feel like their world was over. It says a lot about the way that people are willing to look at their own suffering, but they don't want to acknowledge their privileges that prevent them from not seeing the reality of other suffering. How have you spent your life so sheltered and you felt so bruised by something that wasn't even like a threat or an attack to your life? Like, what do you mean COVID was the end of the world for you because you had to stay in your room all day? Do you not know what it feels like to become disabled and have like your entire social life and physical life and inability to go out and party and hang out with your friends and travel and go to the gym or whatever taken away from you? Do you not know what it feels like to be so low income that you can't afford to eat out or go out or pay for events or traveling? You can barely afford to pay for your own food. You're just like hoping that the food bank has enough to get you through the rest of the month. You've never had to struggle with isolation or depression so bad to the point where you had to pull yourself out of suicidal ideation all on your own without access to other people or other communities. And it's always the people that say, oh my God, COVID was ruining my life, but you Zoom called with your family every weekend. You still like traveled and saw people. You still had like 20 people in your contacts book in your phone to pull out and call when things got hard. You had community. You still had people. You still had your fucking salary. You still had your health. You still had the ability to do things that most people spend their entire lives never being able to do, and that was you in quarantine. You had somewhere to live. Let's start with that. Let's start with the fact that you felt like you were losing your mind because, God forbid, you were confined to a bed, running water, heat, Netflix, technology, phones, family, friends. You were already at a point where your quarantine was somebody else's paradise. Well, everybody's struggles are valid, everybody's this and that. Yes, everybody's problems are valid, and the point of me saying this isn't to completely deteriorate the seriousness of what you might have gone through or what your struggles were. And if COVID and quarantine and lockdown was hard for you, then that's totally valid. I'm so sorry that you felt like you were suffering so much, and I'm so sorry that life kept throwing waves at you that were hard for you to handle. I truly empathize with that, but I'm also not going to sit here and forget to empathize with people who have just been screwed over a million times worse, and that was their entire life up to COVID and through COVID and even after COVID. It just doesn't make sense for me how people like that feel entitled to claim that their struggles are just as bad as somebody else, or well, it was hard for me, so it's valid. You can't tell me that it wasn't hard. Like, of course it was hard for you, obviously, if you lost your mind over not being able to go out to dinner every fucking Friday, but I'm not gonna forget to acknowledge the reality of how this conversation and this rhetoric around COVID and quarantine and lockdown being the end of the world, nobody wants to talk about how I can acknowledge that it was hard for you, but you also have to have the respect and the humility as a person and acknowledge the fact that everything you were freaking out about still came with you being on a position of like the staircase in society. We're still up here, and I'm sorry that you felt like your life was down here when it was up here, but it wasn't down here, and that needs to be discussed because it's just an example, this whole hysteria over COVID and quarantine, how people, even when they feel like the world's ending, they have to find their light in the dark, but their light doesn't come with an acknowledgement of privilege. It doesn't come with developing the type of social awareness. Like those of us that didn't feel like that was the end of our fucking lives, we felt that way because we've endured things that were statistically and objectively things that came with a lot more barriers in society. And I'm obviously not talking about people who like lost their jobs and lost their homes. Like I know that economically a lot of people, when the government was just like, don't go out, you're not allowed to go out and eat, you're gonna die if you go to a restaurant. And there's people who are like, okay, my family literally lives off of our restaurant, and even living off of the money that we make from our restaurant, we're still not getting enough. And so now like we're losing our home, or like we can't afford medical bills and stuff. I'm not talking about people like that, obviously, and I hope that that is being communicated through my words well enough, because that's definitely not my point. How are we ever going to progress as a society when you had your splinter? And for some reason, the suffering of the splinter didn't make you wake the fuck up and develop a deeper awareness and cognizance and empathy of broken legs and murder. You still think that the splinter was the pinnacle. I've dealt with the loss of my health. I know what it feels like to face the threat of death on a daily basis, not because I'm scared of a virus, but because I'm living in domestic violence. All these people that were like, you're fucking such a bitch for going outside and having potential to catch a virus and then go spread the virus. Like, where's your empathy? It's like, where's your what the fuck makes you think that everybody has a home to go to? Maybe that person's at Starbucks because they're charging their phone because they don't have an electrical outlet in their car that they live in. Maybe somebody doesn't want to go home and they keep staying out because when they go home, they know that they might be strangled that night or beaten to death or fucking raped in their sleep. Like, it says a lot about the way that people are willing to look at their own suffering, but they don't want to acknowledge their privileges that prevent them from not seeing the reality of other suffering. I do very much respect and acknowledge the severity of COVID and quarantine regarding, obviously, like, it's a global pandemic, so people fucking died. That was a really hard time. I didn't have anybody personally in my life that died from COVID, but just knowing that people out there had their loved ones dead or permanently altered due to the virus, like, that's not a joke at all. And I'm definitely not talking about people who were freaking out about the virus being a thing and people getting sick, because that was so valid. Like, what are you talking about? You're not gonna I would be an idiot to sit here and try and act like COVID and the virus wasn't a valid thing to be worried about and that it wasn't absolutely destructive, because it did end lives. Like, people did die, right? And it pissed me off that people were out there talking about how it was fake and it didn't exist. I'm like, there's somebody taking their last breath right now. There's somebody whose lungs are never going to be the same because of a virus, and you're fucking sitting on your ass talking about how people are just, sheep to the government, blah, 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 blah. But I'm more specifically talking about, like, how people used COVID to completely, it could have been an opportunity for you to understand how marginalized people are and how a lot of people don't have access to the everyday things that you had, that you felt like you were stuck with all of these hellish cages in COVID. Meanwhile, it just brought out how privileged so many people are. Even myself, like, I had somewhere to live during that time. I had technology, I had running water, I had food, I had access to ordering shit on Walmart and having it shipped to me. But I was not, it felt so stupid of me. Like, I would never sit there and talk about how my life is over because I just have to stay inside and have access to all these wonderful things. So, no, I don't have pity or empathy for people that acted like they were just totally being fucked up the ass, when it just made me really sad, because at a time where COVID and lockdown, the whole quarantine thing was basically a wake up call for who has essential needs, who has their survival needs being met, not just every day, but in a time of crisis, right? In a time of crisis where everybody's scared to leave their fucking house, who has the option to not have to worry about finding those basic needs, that they can literally overnight just have everything and be fine. And you have to make adjustments, and life is weird, and working from home is weird, and all of these things are weird, but you have them. All I could think about during that time was, I have everything I need. I literally have everything I need. And then the judgment of, why are you not staying in your home all day? Well, I'm just repeating myself, but domestic violence, not having a home. Maybe you can't fucking just take time off of work. Maybe you have a certain type of job where you have to go out, you got to get your money, and you can't just sit on a computer. Did I say fuck a lot? Yeah. That was sarcasm. I meant, did I say fucking up? COVID obviously sucked, and the virus is not a joke, and that's all I have to say about it. It's not, I'm not hating on COVID and people that got affected by the virus. It's more just like the fact that it was all about who has access to basic needs, and most of the world didn't have that, and the ones that did, they felt like they were the victims, and that's my problem with it, because they weren't. There's ways to validate and acknowledge what you have gone through and how it was stressful, but you should be able, as a grown-ass adult, to do that with the acknowledgement of people who have less than you. And it was really selfish to me that people couldn't take the time to actually see that. And I don't care if I sound like a bitch for saying it, because I know I'm not the only person that feels that way. I feel like quarantine was just a highlight of, let's be honest about the gaps in like our level one of human needs, and let's be honest about how things are not distributed properly in this world, and all people could do was feel sorry for themselves when they had everything. And that hits a really sensitive place for me, because that is how people continue to get marginalized, and that is how things go unrecognized. Like, you can't change the world just by, you know, thinking things, but you kind of can, because it's that type of awareness that we bring into our thoughts and our words and our actions with other people, our jobs, the way that we stand up for people, the way that we stand up for ourselves. So, yeah, it was really disappointing to see how everything played out. And hopefully, if we have another pandemic, fuck, maybe we can learn from each other this time. I don't know. And I think the worst part about it was that when people talked about stuff like this and said things like, oh, COVID actually isn't changing my life, or like it didn't affect me, you have those same people that were refusing to acknowledge their privileges and their lives turn around and say that you're being insensitive. Like, how am I being insensitive for being sensitive enough to like actually see what's going on here? How am I being insensitive for not having a lack of empathy and awareness regarding how life pre-COVID and current COVID either was different for some people or the same for some people, or how different people's realities, or how different people experience their reality during the same time? Everybody kept talking about how we're all in the same boat and everybody's struggling, and it's important to remember that, but we're not in the same boat. Having a global pandemic, having a virus that can get everyone sick, doesn't put everybody in the same world. We're all physically on the same planet, but that did not mean that everybody was in a different world. So not everybody had access to the same resources and opportunities. Not everybody could just follow protocols blindly, because it might actually put their lives at risk. I'm sorry you were afraid of people who weren't swabbing their nose and staying inside all day, but like those people actually had bigger battles to fight. And there was this just so weird to see how many people didn't see that. Like, how many people really did not fucking get it through their heads that there were actually bigger battles than a virus. And it's so disrespectful to me that people feel like saying something like that is inappropriate, because how could you claim to have empathy? How can you claim to be all about social awareness, but you don't want to let people be honest about saying things like, hey, I actually do have a lot worse going on in my life than this virus, and I will try to be considerate and like respect people and keep myself and others safe, but that's not my fucking apocalypse right now. Like, my apocalypse is so much worse. And that's true, because there is a scale of suffering, there is levels of privileges to each aspect of a person's lives, and there's aspects of loss and inability to suffice in people's different areas of people's lives. So yeah, I'm just gonna end it here.